I never thought I'd be afraid of a car wash. That I mean, it's a car wash at a place you go to get the road grime and bugs splatter off your windshield. But this one out on Highway 30 just outside of Grand Island, Nebraska. It's different. That it's called Suds and Shine, which is about as generic as it gets for the Midwest. That it's the kind of place you drive right past without a second thought. A low, beige building with 2 automated bays and a row of self-service vacuum hoses that always seem to be out of order. I was there because of Chloe. Chloe with the laugh that could cut through a bad mood and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. That we weren't dating, not officially. That we worked together at a dreary insurance firm in Lincoln, and this was a work trip, a 2-day audit at a client's office in Grand Island. Our boss, a man who believed suffering built character, had insisted we take his old company sedan, a beige boat of a Buick that smelled faintly of stale coffee, and defeat. Chloe was riding shotgun, her knees pulled up to her chest, bare feet on the leather seat. That she kicked her sandals off an hour into the drive. That I kept catching glimpses of her feet out of the corner of my eye. Her toenails were painted a deep, blood-red crimson, a shocking slash of color against the beige interior. The thin strap of her sandal had left a faint pink indent across the top of her foot, and I found myself staring at it, wondering what that mark would feel like under my thumb. That it was a stupid, distracting thought, the kind that pops up when you're trapped in a car for 3 hours with a woman who makes your throat feel tight. God, this car is a dump, she said, wrinkling her perfect nose. She had this way of speaking, a low, husky murmur that felt like a secret being shared just with you. It smells like someone died in here and then tried to cover it up with an air freshener from a truck stop. I think that's exactly what happened, I said, forcing my eyes back to the endless stretch of cornfields and flatland. His last sales rep quit somewhere around North Platte. They never found the body, just a pine tree-shaped air freshener dangling from the rear view. She laughed, that sharp, beautiful sound, and stretched, arching her back. Her blouse, a simple white cotton thing, strained against her chest, and for a heart-stopping second, I saw the clear outline of her lace bra beneath the fabric. That I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. This was a bad idea. This whole trip was a bad idea. The client was difficult, the hotel was probably a roach motel, and being this close to Chloe for 48 straight hours was a special kind of torture. The good kind and the awful kind all mixed together. We should get it washed, she said, gesturing at the bug-encrusted windshield. That a legion of June bugs had met their end on the glass, their yellow guts smeared into a grisly mosaic. It's getting hard to see, and I refuse to show up to a business meeting in a car that looks like it's been through a locust plague. I nodded, my throat dry. Sure. Next one we see. There wasn't much next to see. That's the thing about rural Nebraska. You have towns, and then you have miles of nothing in between. It was another 20 minutes before the Suds and Shine loomed into view on the right side of the highway, its flickering neon sign buzzing a weak pink and blue into the fading afternoon light. This looks pristine, Chloe said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. It's got character, I said, pulling off the highway and onto the cracked asphalt lot. The place was deserted. No other cars, no attendant. Just the low hum of machinery from inside the bay and the lonely whine of the wind sweeping across the plains. A metal box with a credit card reader stood next to the entrance to the automated bay. The prices were listed on a sun-bleached placard: Basic, Deluxe, Ultimate. The Ultimate promised a triple brush scrub, underbody blast, and Rain-X sealant. Go for the Ultimate, Chloe said, unbuckling her seatbelt and leaning over to look at the prices. Her hair, the color of dark honey, brushed against my arm, and I caught a scent of her shampoo, something with coconut. My heart did a stupid, clumsy thump against my ribs. Might as well. The company's paying for it, right? Right, I mumbled, fumbling for my wallet. I swiped my card, selected Ultimate, and the mechanical arm lifted, a silent invitation into the dark mouth of the wash. I drove the Buick slowly over the track guide and put it in park. The engine ticked softly, the world outside the windshield disappeared, replaced by the heavy rubber strips of the entrance. For a moment we were in a dim, silent tunnel. Then the machinery clanked to life. The first cycle was standard. A spray of pre-soak, then a flood of soapy foam, thick and white, completely obscuring the windows. the giant brushes descended, spinning with a low rhythmic whump 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 sound as they dragged across the car. Chloe hugged her knees tighter, watching the brushes with a faintly apprehensive look on her face. "It's like being eaten by a giant, soapy caterpillar," she said. I laughed, but it sounded strained. The enclosure felt suddenly smaller, more pressurized. The noise was overwhelming, a mechanical roar that vibrated through the chassis and into my bones that I could feel the vibrations through the seat, up my spine. That I glanced at Chloe. The white foam light, filtering through the suds, gave her skin an eerie, luminous glow. She caught me looking and smiled, a quick, nervous flicker. The soap cycle ended, and the rinse began. High-pressure jets of water sluiced the suds away in great, clear sheets. For a few seconds we could see out into the bay again. It was just a concrete tunnel with hoses and machinery. Normal. Mundane. Then the lights went out. Not all of them. The emergency lights, dim red bulbs spaced along the ceiling, flickered on, casting the bay in a bloody, pulsating gloom. The water jets sputtered and died. The only sound was the drip 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 of water from the roof of the car and the distant, frantic hum of a pump trying and failing to restart. "What happened?" Chloe asked, her voice small in the sudden silence. "Power glitch, I guess," I said, trying to sound unconcerned. "Happens out here. Probably a tractor hit a pole somewhere." I reached for the ignition, thought about just driving out through the rubber strips, but the track held the wheels firm. We were stuck. The silence stretched. A minute. 2. It was a thick, heavy silence, broken only by our breathing and the occasional drip of water. The red light made everything look surreal, like a photograph drenched in dye. I looked at Chloe. In the hellish glow, her red toenails looked black. The strap mark on her foot was a dark welt. I had a sudden, irrational urge to reach out and touch her ankle, to feel the delicate bones there, to see if her skin was as warm as it looked. The thought was so inappropriate, so out of place in the claustrophobic anxiety, that it made my face heat with shame. That's when I saw him. Movement outside my window. A figure standing just beyond the rubber strips of the exit. The lights were so dim, the figure was little more than a silhouette, but he was tall and unnaturally thin. He was just standing there, perfectly still, facing the car, watching us. "Who is that?" Chloe whispered, her voice tight. She'd seen him too. She pulled her feet down from the seat, sitting up straight, her body tense. "Probably the attendant," I said, but the words felt hollow. There was no attendant. The place was self-serve. "Maybe he's coming to tell us what's wrong." But the man didn't move. He just stood there, a cutout shape against the slightly less dark rectangle of the exit. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of his head, the slope of his shoulders. He was wearing a long, dark coat, which seemed strange for a Nebraska autumn evening that was still relatively warm. Another minute ticked by. The drip 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 of water was starting to feel like a timer counting down. The man didn't shift his weight, didn't scratch his nose, didn't do any of the small human things people do when they're just standing around. He was a statue. "This is creepy," Chloe said. She slid closer to me in the seat, her hip pressing against mine. I could feel the heat of her through our clothes. My body reacted to her proximity instantly, a surge of adrenaline and desire that was completely at odds with the cold dread seeping into my stomach. Her thigh was pressed against mine. I could see the rapid flutter of her pulse in her neck. I wanted to put my arm around her. I wanted to lock the doors. I wanted to gun the engine and smash through the tracks. I just sat there, frozen. Then, with a loud clank that made us both jump, the lights flickered back on. The water jets roared to life, finishing the rinse cycle with a violent intensity, blinding us with a wall of water. I whipped my head back toward the exit. The man was gone. The final rinse ended, and the blowers kicked in, howling like a jet engine, shaking the car as they blasted the water away. The exit arm lifted, daylight flooded the bay. I didn't wait. I threw the car into drive and accelerated out of the wash, the tires squealing slightly on the wet concrete. I scanned the lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nothing. The parking lot was empty. The highway beyond was quiet. There was no sign of the tall, thin man in the long coat. "What the hell was that?" Chloe asked, her voice shaky. She was still pressed against my side. "I don't know," I admitted, pulling around to the vacuum stations and putting the car in park. My hands were trembling on the wheel. "Weird guy. Maybe he was just a hitchhiker or something waiting for the bus." It was a pathetic explanation. There was no bus stop for miles. He was just staring, she said, shuddering. The movement made her breast brush against my arm. I flinched, the contact electric and unwanted. This wasn't the time. It felt predatory. I got out of the car, needing the air. The Nebraska wind hit me, cool and smelling of dry earth and distant rain. It should have been calming. It wasn't. I felt exposed. I grabbed the vacuum hose, more for something to do than anything else, and started clumsily running it over the floor mats. My mind was replaying that silhouette, that utter, profound stillness. Chloe got out too, pacing a little on the asphalt in her bare feet. She hugged herself, rubbing her arms. The wind tugged at her blouse, outlining her body in a way that was even now distractingly beautiful. I watched the way her jeans hugged the curve of her hips as she turned, the delicate bones of her ankles. I was disgusted with myself. A strange man had just been staring at us in a dark, broken-down car wash, and I was staring at my coworker's ass. The two feelings, fear and desire, were tangling together in my gut, a nauseating cocktail. I finished the vacuuming and tossed the hose back onto its rack. "Let's just go," I said. We got back in the car. The interior was spotless. It smelled of fake pine and cleanliness. It should have felt like a fresh start. It felt like a tomb. I was about to pull back onto the highway when Chloe said, "Wait." She was leaning forward, peering at the dashboard. The mileage. I looked down. The digital odometer read 78,342. "What about it?" "When we went into the car wash," she said slowly, her voice low and serious, "I remember looking at it. I was bored. It was 78,342. Exactly. So the trip from the highway to the car wash is maybe 100 yards? The track inside moves the car, what, 50 feet? We should be at 78,343. Maybe 78,344 if the track is long." A cold finger traced its way down my spine. She was right. It was a tiny, insignificant detail, but it was wrong. The car hadn't moved an entire mile. It hadn't moved a tenth of a mile. "Glitch in the sensor," I said too quickly. "This old piece of junk probably has a short somewhere." I put the car in drive and pulled out onto the highway, pressing the accelerator harder than necessary. We drove in silence for a while. The encounter with the stranger and the odd mileage thing had cast a pall over the car. The sexual tension was still there, a live wire, but now it was intertwined with a new, sharp-edged anxiety. We checked into our hotel, a predictably dismal Holiday Inn Express, on opposite sides of the same floor. The audit the next day was long and tedious. The client was as difficult as promised. Throughout the day I caught myself glancing out the conference room window, half expecting to see a tall, thin figure in a long coat standing across the street, just watching. I saw nothing but normal people going about their normal days. Chloe and I barely spoke, a professional distance having settled between us. But I kept catching her looking at me when she thought I wasn't watching, her expression unreadable. Was it fear? Attraction? Disgust at my obvious staring in the car? I didn't know. The work day finally ended. We got back into the clean Buick. The first few miles back toward Lincoln were quiet. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple behind the endless rows of corn. It was Chloe who broke the silence. "We have to go back," she said. I glanced at her. "What? Why?" "The car wash, suds and shine." "Are you insane? After yesterday?" "That's why," she said, her voice firm, but I could see her hands were clenched in her lap, her knuckles were white. "It's bothering you. It's bothering me. It was just a weird guy and a coincidence with the odometer. If we go through it again and everything is normal, we can laugh about it. We can forget it. Otherwise," she trailed off. "Otherwise it becomes a thing. A story we tell ourselves in the dark. I knew what she meant. The not knowing was worse than knowing, even if the knowing was bad. Chloe, it's a stupid car wash." "Then it shouldn't be a problem to go through it?" she challenged, a flash of her usual spirit returning. She turned in her seat to face me. "Unless you're scared." It was a dare. And there was a part of me, the part that was acutely aware of her as a woman, that couldn't back down from a dare from her. It was idiot male programming, pure and simple. "Fine," I sighed, my shoulders slumping in defeat. "But if there's another creepy guy, we're leaving." The sun was almost down by the time the Suds and Shine sign came into view. Its pink and blue neon was brighter against the twilight sky. This time there was one other car there, a beat-up pickup truck, its owner vacuuming out the bed. A normal sight. It made me feel slightly better. I pulled up to the payment box. Basic wash, I said, selecting the cheapest option. No need for the ultimate today. Chloe nodded, her eyes fixed on the entrance to the bay as she put her sandals back on. I saw her toes, those crimson nails, curl nervously inside the straps. I drove onto the track, the familiar clunk of the guides locking the wheels in place. The entrance flaps closed behind us. Soap began to spray, the white foam covering the windows. See, I said, my voice sounding too loud in the enclosed space. Normal. The brushes started their whump whump whump. We sat in silence, watching the foam. The cycle seemed to take forever. I kept glancing at the odometer. 78, 391. I committed it to memory. The soap cycle ended. The rinse began. Clear water washed the suds away. We could see the length of the bay. It was empty. Well-lit.no figures.no glitches. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. See? Totally normal. We're almost done. The rinse cycle finished. The water shut off. This was it. The blowers should kick in now, the arm should lift, and we'd drive out. Mission accomplished. We could go home. But the blowers didn't start. Instead, a new sound began. A low, deep hum, like a giant industrial freezer powering up. From nozzles we hadn't noticed before, a thick, viscous, dark blue fluid began to spray onto the sea air. It wasn't soap. It wasn't water. It was syrupy, almost oily, and it smelled sweet, cloyingly sweet, like overripe fruit and chemical lavender. It slathered the windows, plunging us into a deep, blue darkness. What is that? Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. What cycle is this? I don't know, I said, my own heart starting to hammer again. I got the basic. This isn't on the list. Rinse, wax, that's it. This isn't wax. The hum grew louder. The car began to vibrate, not from blowers, but from a deep, subsonic frequency that seemed to come up from the tracks themselves. It rat.